Howdy, and welcome back to You've Got People Problems, the podcast where we tackle the leadership challenges no one wants to talk about, but every business faces. I'm your host, Melissa Ortiz with Activate Human Capital Group. Today's conversation is with Carol Enneking. You'll hear more about her background as we get into the episode, but what matters most is her perspectives on the idea of balance and what it actually looks like in real life, not just on paper. She's written a book on the topic, and in the conversation, what we're going to talk about is why balance isn't about perfection, but more about adaptability, how leaders and professionals get stuck carrying expectations that don't serve them any longer, and what it means to create margin instead of constantly trying to do more. This is all about how letting go can be just as important as pushing forward. So, with that in mind, let's get to it. Howdy, and welcome to You've Got People Problems. I am Melissa Ortiz, and I'm here today with Carol Enneking, who's been a friend of mine for longer than I probably should admit. Has been a client of mine, a team member of mine, and just a really dear friend. So our topic today is how business and life really require a constant rebalancing act, and that just happens to be the name of Carol's recent book. Carol, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you want everyone to know before we dive into our discussion today.
I'm Carol Enneking. I've lived in the Houston area for over 50 years, so it's definitely like home. And I spent over 30 years navigating between corporate and entrepreneurial ventures. I'm back out on my own now. I have two grown children and one bonus daughter, stepdaughter. So I've navigated the working motherhood for decades and needed my own rebalancing act. I tried to do it all and have it all and be it all for decades, and I have the scars to prove it. And so the book and the exploration of what rebalancing really looks like and finding what matters, letting go of the rest, that's been a personal quest for me. And now it's just my mission to help others figure these things out more quickly and with less scar tissue than I did.
Finding what matters and letting go of the rest. I think if we take nothing else out of this conversation, that will be a huge win.
Yeah.
So as
Yeah.
so I guess I'll start here. If you're here because you know Carol and how wonderful she is, and you don't know who I am, my name is Mel Ortiz, and I am all about understanding how to get the most out of people within our organizations. So that requires getting the right butts in the right seats so that they're set up to thrive, making sure that they're engaged over time so we're getting the best performance from them. And the reason this has been continually engaging to me in terms of a sandbox for the last 20 years of my career has been because I see the mutual benefit for our organizations, for our customers, internal and external that we serve, but also for our employees. Because when I'm the right person in the right seat and I'm engaged in my work, I have all this extra capacity in my life for my faith, my physical well-being, my family, community service, so much extra gas in the tank that I don't have access to if I'm in the wrong seat, if I'm disengaged at work. And so this to me is a very holistic mission that I love being on. So You've Got People Problems really stemmed out of what are the issues we continually see in our own, head trash, as well as in the workplace, and how do we start picking those apart? So, Carol, I love this topic of the rebalancing act and thinking about both personally and professionally. Which piece should we start with? Where do you want to go down this
You
path?
know, it's a tough one. And I think you and I both, the reason we connected so many years ago was that passion around people, whether it's the business side, the personal side, but it's about being holistic. And so I think we almost have to start with the personal side because we bring our whole selves to work. We don't just park who we are at the door. I mean, some people try, and that's stress right there. Head
That's sweet,
trash, is that
but
what you
totally
call it?
unrealistic.
That's, yeah. And so I think we have to start with the personal side because it's who you are and it's how you show up at work. So it is all intertwined. You can't leave one and just focus on the other. And I think as we realize that and companies realize that, we're able to tap into more of those unique talents and that potential that makes somebody a very special asset to us. And so let's start personal.
Okay, let's start personal. Okay, so here's where this resonates for me. Yesterday, I was at my entrepreneurs group, the EO Entrepreneurs Organization, and our learning day was around strategy. We were talking a lot about vision and where we're headed as organizations. And the last 15 minutes of the segment was about your personal 10-year kind of vision, where you'd like to
Mm.
be, what do you need to
Wow.
start and stop doing. And I had this moment like, oh my God, in 10 years, my children will be in college. They're currently 9 and 11. So they're in this awesome sweet spot. But in 10 years, my life will be so different. My parents are currently like super on fire. My dad's 76 and my mom is 73. In 10 years, if when my dad's 86, he may actually slow down. It's hard for me to envision, but I believe it's possible.
I know.
So it was this like, whoa, I've got to get really intentional over that window about the things I want to fit into my life, totally outside of work, to make sure my kids have the experiences I want them to have, and I have the quality time I want with my parents. And whoa, it
Yeah.
kind of hit me like a load of bricks.
Yeah. And you know what's really interesting to me as you say that? You and I probably met 15 years ago, maybe. You didn't have kids. You
I
were
know.
just brand newly married. And isn't it crazy how the time escalates? It's just like you blink your eyes. I mean, when I met you, my kids were probably 9 and 11, and now they're 26 and 28 as of this week. And it really does fly by. And these years that you have with your children in your life are so precious. They're so filled with things to do. And it's so funny how many cliches they are, but they're cliches because they're true. I mean, people say them and repeat them because they have some meaning for them. And that whole, the days are long, but the years are short. Oh my gosh, that one really hits home for me. And you feel like I just can remember potty training like it was yesterday and thinking, oh my gosh, this is maybe the hardest thing I've ever tried to do. I could manage things at work, but I can't seem to get my kid potty trained. Of course, shortly thereafter, that one was solved and they were potty trained. But it's just different. And then you go through these phases, but we stay so busy. It's almost like this. We're on this treadmill, or we used to call it the hamster wheel, where you're just going, 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 and you don't step off long enough to contemplate those things. So when you started talking about that 10-year plan and that question that you asked yesterday in your meeting, I think it's great that it was even mentioned out loud, because I have found more people, and having interviewed like 70 people or so for the book, I found more people who never really stop long enough to think. And it's sad because it's just like creating culture, talent and culture and all that stuff in a company. It's like you can either be deliberate about it or not deliberate, but it will happen whether you intend for it to unfold the way it does or not. And it's the same way with our lives. I mean, time ticks by, and here you are. And now I'm in my mid 50s, and wow, I mean, I feel like I was just in my mid 30s. So I have a whole lot more wisdom now, though.
I know, I know. So I think about this idea of there's like people talk about balance, but it's such a fleeting thing because you might feel like you have it on a Sunday afternoon and by Monday morning it's gone. And so
Yeah.
I love the idea of the rebalancing act because it feels kinetic. It feels like a constant thing that we're doing. And
Because it is. And
that
I
we're
do
doing in
think
multiple areas of our life,
balance,
right?
yeah, I mean, and balance is just this, like you said, it's fleeting. It's this state of complete equality between various things. And the minute you feel like you have that, something tips. And so to me, it's not so much about having balance. We laugh and people say, I don't believe in work life balance. I've been interviewed by several people who've said that. I'm not sure I do either, because it's sort of this thing that's always going to outdistance you. But it's about our agility in the moment. It's about the rebalancing. And when you know your priorities, you know where you're headed and what's most important to you, and you're able to let the other stuff go, you are far more able in the moment to be agile and figure out, what do I need to do right now? What's the next step, even if you don't know where the path is going? And so it's funny how when you're writing a book and you're thinking of a title for the book, oh my gosh, I mean, I sat with the titles for a couple of months, and just words upon words upon words. And I had my friend Bethany helping me, Bethany. And we went round and round and round. And then we finally landed. And I was like, I like the Rebalancing Act. And then of course you have to think about the subtitle. But it really resonated, but I had no idea at the time just how much it resonated. It resonates with my own lived experience of trying to juggle all these things or spin all these plates or whatever adage you want to use. It resonates in that way, but it also resonates in business. I've worked with over 150 companies, and by that I mean one-on-one work. It's not like I got people into rooms for big seminars or anything. I mean, these are clients where I went in and I got a sense of what the companies were all about, because I've been doing the entrepreneurial thing for a while. And then I also did the corporate thing for a while. And you realize really quickly it's the same story in business. When you try to ask a CEO or an executive team to name the top 3 priorities right now, I'm not talking core values, I'm not talking about your company mission, I'm talking about to get there, to get towards your vision, to get, to fulfill your mission, what's most important for you to do right now? They can't name 3. They
They can
usually
name
name
40.
about 25. Yeah, exactly. And then we laugh because I keep talking in cliches, but they're cliches for a reason. When everything's important, nothing is. Doesn't that resonate?
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's the same thing that people personally experience. Like, I'm ambitious and driven and dependable and caring and want to make a good impression and all of those things, which makes me a good worker. But those very things sometimes mean that I'm going to throw my energy behind everything in that same way. And when we do that, we're not very good at discerning what to spend energy or time on and what not to. And I think businesses have that effect on people. And so it's this sort of compounding or exponential effect where they're all, the business is filled with wonderful, capable people who are all just working as hard as they can every single day to do everything they can. But do we stop and jump off the treadmill long enough to figure out if we're working on the right things and the things that matter most? And even when we think we're working on the right things and we have good alignment, it's rare that you see the interdepartmental collaboration where people say, well, here's my top priority, 1 or 2 or 3. How about yours? And do they align, or do they conflict with each other? And
Yes.
the more you talk about it, the more you realize that people have a lot that absolutely conflict. And it might even be as simple as, they're asking all the field offices to do this initiative, and they didn't realize that their rollout schedules are right on top of each other. And then we
It's true.
wonder why people in the field are shaking their heads going, those corporate people, if they would just get things together for us,
They
because
just
they're trying to
talk.
get product out the door.
I've got a client that makes me think about uh, where they're working on, they continually update their handbook once a year, but they
Well,
continually
at least they
update
have a
their
handbook.
policies that live in the handbook weekly, daily, and they'll send out these memos or emails. They don't even send them out in the same way. And the employees at the field level are going, "Hello, I can't even go to my policy manual to look up the policy because you don't have time to update it at corporate, but you want us, every field office, to update our own or print it, shove it in my policy manual. Oh, but it's digital. Like, how are we supposed to keep track of this? Because there are these conflicting desires, and it's
And isn't it crazy when you add in the fact that you probably have people on the front lines working with their hands or creating or producing something that has them completely focused on that. They may not even have access to email. They don't look at that handbook. And yet we think, well, we put it out in
we
an
updated
email.
it.
Don't they know they're responsible for it? So we sometimes get so busy with the procedural that we aren't thinking about the process of making sure people understand and digest what it is we're trying to tell them. It's crazy, and it's funny when people don't work in environments in that, because they're like, surely businesses aren't that chaotic. It's
Oh,
like,
wait.
maybe it's just the ones I worked with. And they do a lot of things right. I'm not trying to say they do everything wrong, but there's just a lot of that frenetic pacing that tends to kind of drive people crazy, burn them out, make them wonder if the grass is greener somewhere else, and then we wonder why we have a talent issue. Because people aren't going to stick around 30 years like they used to when I first started my corporate career. They'll jump ship if they don't feel like their talents are being used, if they don't feel engaged. You know that. You research that all the time. But it's funny because a lot of times I think leaders scratch their heads and look at, well, what's wrong with these people? What's wrong with this generation or with this fill in the blank for whatever stereotype people want to think is at play here, but they're not taking a good long hard look in the mirror saying, did I do something to contribute to this? Did our culture, did our leadership style, did our lack of communication do something to cause this stem, the something to make the talent leave? So
I do think I have a lot of negative, horrible things to say about COVID-19, but I think it's one thing for our global economy that it forced people to stop for a minute and go, wow, life's too short. Life's short to put up with this manager, with this company culture, with this hamster wheel that I've been on. And maybe I need to step back and get a feel for what are my values? What are my priorities? What do I actually want out of this life, however much time I have, in a way that we haven't maybe
yeah,
before.
I agree. And I think that it's really interesting now to look at, well, first of all, during COVID-19, we lost 25% of the female workforce in 2020 in the United States because ultimately, with all these juggling acts that we do, when one thing breaks down, like schools close, daycare closes, something has to give. And this is not a female problem. This is something that I think males and females are both challenged with. But I do think women think differently than men. And I think there's sort of this invisible sense of responsibility for holding the family together, holding down the fort, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so more often than not, that caregiving default may fall to the female in the family. Not every time, but I think it's interesting that people had to make some pretty major changes, and then all of a sudden they go back to the workforce. Some people got to work remote, some people didn't. Some people who worked remote were far more productive because they weren't sitting in traffic for 2 hours a day like we do in Houston, Texas. It's not all, I think it's really interesting how the old school thought of management is that you've got to see employees there and they've got to be physically part of the office team, and we're managing more to those activities instead of managing to outcomes. And if we just managed to outcomes and looked at the work product that people are putting out, we might make some different decisions about how often they need to be in the office. I'm not saying people should never have office time or live connection. I think that's actually been a bad thing. I think you need that connection from time to time, but I think the more we can be flexible and try to meet people where they are and really be focused on what it is they bring to the table and do uniquely well and let them unleash them to do that, I think we'll be better off. But when you look at the studies about people disconnecting from offices, there's also kind of that side of the more we connect digitally, the less we connect in real life. And there's an epidemic of loneliness now. According to some research I've read this year, I liked that wording, an epidemic of loneliness, because you're more connected than ever on
Yes.
socials, on Zoom, on all kinds of things. But are you
And yet there's
making
no depth to it.
real connections, face to
Yeah.
face connections? There's no substitute for that. You got to get out of your house. You got to get out of that office and go see people and talk to people. We've kind of lost the art of conversation somewhere in there. So there's good and bad around all this, but I think that women are still struggling to try to figure out how to how to prioritize what matters and how to let go of the guilt and the obligation and the feeling like they need to be doing everything. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. Just
Yeah.
because you're capable of doing all these things doesn't mean you should try to do them all. And
I
that's a
love
lesson I've had to learn myself the hard way.
I keep learning it. I think probably one of my favorite tricks, hacks, if you will, in this space is permission
Mhm.
slips. Like giving myself and other people permission slips, even clients. Like, you have a
Yeah,
permission slip to do it your way. You have a permission slip to say no and not feel guilt about it. You have a permission slip to say, thank you for thinking of me. I can't give that my full energy right now, and I only do things at this
yes,
level. So if I say yes to you, I've got to find two or three other things that I'm going to say no to. But I'm I hope you ask me again, but this isn't the right time. Like, that
I love
ability to
it.
say no in a way that really honors your priorities, your values is something that I work on with so many of my clients because they're stretched too thin.
Mhm.
Our mutual friend Denise McIntyre, one of the
Oh,
things she
yeah.
talks about is time poor. We're all time
Yes.
poor. We're busy being
Yes.
busy. We're flustered. We're exhausted. And at what cost? Usually the cost of our physical well-being, often
That
our
was
professional
definitely mine.
relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
just like, for what? What is the outcome we're really, is it the next job? Is it, our, and when we're physically there, are we giving our all because there's so many things nagging at us psychologically
Yep.
about what we're not doing elsewhere? And just like, I'm not going to worry about that. I wrote down on my note yesterday, one of the things I need to stop doing for my 10-year plan is I've depth of relationships is critically important to me. Like, one of my absolute core values. I like to swim in the deep end, I say. I don't want to swim in the shallows. I want to swim in the deep end with other people. And one of the things I wanted to give my stuff to stop doing is continually investing in friendships where the other side has shown me it's not a priority for them. Like, I just
Amen,
need to
sister.
let that go. Like, they're still a
Yeah.
friend. They can be an acquaintance. They can be a friend that's kind of in the past. I don't need to keep investing when it seems so one-sided. And I'm like, oh,
One-sided.
that feels good. There are 4 or 5 people I can let stay connected to, but let them go a little
And
bit.
just because you let them go now doesn't mean you're letting them go forever. I think friendships have seasons. There are
Yeah.
times when I don't talk to people for a while. Oh, okay, I'm going to use you as an example. We don't talk every week. We don't have regularly scheduled one-on-ones, but I know that when I need you or if I pick up the phone, we're going to pick up where we left off. And that to me, that's a great friend because that's the kind of friend where you don't have to waste a lot of energy on, am I constantly giving and not taking?
Maintenance.
That kind of thing, the maintenance stuff. And there's so much to say about this and unpack around this. I love the permission slips. I love the idea of being able to say no without guilt. And the strength of your no determines the strength of your yeses. And so you have to be able to say no so that you can say yes and really devote your energy to the things that matter most. And one of the words that has been really meaningful for me that I use with my clients is legacy. And I'll ask questions like what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to say about you when you've left this job or left this stage of life or left this earth? What do you want to be known for? Because if you would have asked me, Melissa, when you and I met, if somebody would have said, tell me about Carol, you probably would have said, she's busy, she gets a lot done, she's a go-getter, give her something when you need to get it done, she is all in. And they would have talked about how much I get done, but also my friends would have said, she's pretty stressed. I don't know if she has a lot of fun. She
Frazzled, I think, is one
puts
of
her
the words I would use to describe you.
frazzled. Yeah, she
Yeah.
puts herself last. She puts her well-being last. And the sad part is I'm such a type A that 10 years later, even when I had part of my rebalancing act, it all started personally. A lot of the decisions I've made in business have been born out of necessity from my personal life. And in this case, it was a divorce. And so I had found love again. I was living life in a great way. I was, getting my kids through college. It was all wonderful, but I had breast cancer. And the funny thing is, the oncologist was like, hey, the one thing that you can probably do that will keep you from having a recurrence is lower your stress level. And I bet you they should just like hit play and just say it. Because I'm sure they say it 1,000 times a month.
But talk
But I
about easier said
tried.
than done. Whew.
And I tried, but I was moving up in the corporate world then. I mean, I was the brave person who went from being an entrepreneur, teaching everything there was to know about leadership. By the way, I mean, I should have known everything there was to know about leadership, being a great leader. And then I did something either, I'm not sure if it was stupid or brave. I like to think brave, but I went back on the inside and had to work my way up. I got 2 enroll promotions to become a vice president. That was important to me for some reason. I think I was trying to prove to myself that I could still do it on the inside. But let me tell you, living that leadership day in, day out on the inside with all the corporate politics and everything else, that's a whole lot tougher than teaching people how to be great leaders. So I was working a lot. I was working really hard. Was I taking care of myself? Not really. I was trying to lower my stress level. My dear friend Elisa, who you and I both know, she's like, you're doing too much again. And she was always kind of like my conscience in my
Wave the
ear telling me
flag.
to slow down. But it wasn't until I went to the doctor and had high blood pressure out of the blue. I was doing the best work of my life. I was feeling so good. And I end up with high blood pressure. And I finally told my boss, I said, I think my body is trying to tell me that I can't continue working the way I have been. And yet here I was. I mean, I had rebalanced a lot. I had found love again. I had found a better life. I was really enjoying it, but I didn't have a great way of slowing down and jumping off the treadmill. And since I have finally completed the second part of my rebalance, I mean, the big rebalancing act, I've been able to just sit back, take some deep breaths, enjoy life a whole lot more, have a slower pace, and not completely stress myself out all the time. And like I said, it took me a long time to figure this out. But now my parents and my mother-in-law, they were all in their 80s, and I needed every bit of that margin in my life to be able to take care of them. And so, you get your kids out of college, you think life is getting easier, but it just changes. And what a privilege it is to have my aging parents around and have been able to take care of them. My dad suffered with Alzheimer's for 11 years, and he ended up passing away this summer. And you don't want to have regrets about, gosh, I never was able to be there. I never was able to spend time with the people who mattered. And then my mother, the healthy one, she takes 1 pill a day. She's 85. She fell. And she had a really bad fall. She could not move her leg for almost 4 months. So I had to be there to help and help take care of her. Thankfully, I have wonderful siblings and we share the load, but you just never know what's going to come up in your life. And if you don't have any margin, if you're so filled with things to do, you have no time left to be fulfilled. And the curveballs will come. We all know. I mean, hopefully not another pandemic anytime soon, but things happen, the world shifts, and we have to be able to be agile. And part of doing that is letting go of the guilt and the expectations and creating some margin in ourselves for, it's fulfillment, but it's really enjoyment. It's such a shame that it took me this long to figure it out.
Yeah, I teach a lot of, this. I do a lot of work with this Gallup Strengths Finder. I think it's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
as much as I love predictive index and I do help clients do a lot of hiring with it from an individual development perspective, I absolutely still love the Strengths Finder. And one of the things I often talk to people about in my sessions is like, you're a very busy, productive person. Do you put things on your list that involve taking care of yourself? And they all kind of go, oh, no.
yeah.
But that's the only way that people like us can get self-care uh, to meet that need is we actually just have to treat it like every other thing in our life. It's like, I'm going to take a nap today. I'm going to read a book. I joined a book club, so I'd have to read a book to get time with my
I
friends.
did too. I did too. And oh, by the way, Mahjong, my new obsession. I love it.
And-
So, but I'm like, you know what? I'm using my brain, I'm connecting with friends, and I'm having some fun. Good for
Yeah,
me. And
but
and
that
thankfully
had
I
to
have
get
a
on your
husband who
list.
supports that. But it
Yeah,
but it has to be scheduled. Like I do Mahjong on Wednesdays.
yeah,
And and I don't think it's just women who are struggling with this. I think it's a function of all this opportunity we have to lead a wonderfully amazing full life. We've got technology at our fingertips that was supposed to make life easier, but I think it's also created this new kind of pressure of what things ought to look like in our lives. And having been someone who spent so much of my life checking boxes, you know, go to college, get a good job, get married, have kids, It was always about what's the next thing I need to check the box on. And it was just kind of the way I was raised. And by my dad mainly, he was very into superlatives. And it was like, you will do this, you will do that, you won't do this, and you won't do that. And so I spent so much time living up to everybody else's expectations. And I don't think I ever stopped to say, what do I want for myself? And the beautiful thing about something like StrengthsFinder and why I love it is that it helps you identify what you're uniquely gifted at. Because there's a big difference. You mentioned it at the very beginning when you were describing what it looks like to be in the right seat on the bus, doing the right things. But there's a big difference in working the things that you're uniquely talented at versus just your skills. And so, for example, how many financial oriented women do you know, and probably men too, but women in particular, that get asked to be the treasurer of every single volunteer organization, from the PTA to the scout troop to whatever. And every time someone says, I'm a CPA or I've got a finance degree, it's like, oh, can you please do the books for our organization? And I laugh because all my friends who are CPAs are like, they try to whisper it because they don't want to be approached about being yet another treasurer of
Yeah.
another organization. It's like, just because they can doesn't mean they should always say yes, because by the way, then they do a great job. And then they can't find someone to take that person's place because they're
Right.
so good at it. That's a skill. Maybe it's also a talent. Maybe they really enjoy it. But when you say yes every single time to things like that, you don't have
You won't
time
enjoy any of
for
them.
margin. Yeah. It's just, and the same thing, like we're getting in that time of year with the holidays, and, moms are the holiday magic makers in the families. You don't have to be a mom. Women are the holiday magic makers, I should say. But when you have kids, you do things like the elf on the shelf. That's a new thing, by the way. Yeah, since I had kids. And I mean, if that's your joy and you really love it, go to town. But if you're posting on Instagram every night the amazing antics of your elf on the shelf to feel better about yourself or to make others feel less than, or if you're that person that's looking at somebody else doing all those amazing elf on the shelf antics and you're starting to say, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad mom, I'm not doing that, let it go. I can tell you right now, your kids will not remember. I mean, by the way, I think the concept of the elf on the shelf is it moves from one place to the other. So just
Oh,
move the
yes.
elf. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about whether you have gourmet lunches for your kids. I asked my kids one on one, we have very close relationships. I said, I want you to tell me honestly, now that you're grown up, you're adulting, you're working hard yourselves, did you ever feel like my job came before you? Did you feel like you were an afterthought, or that I didn't have enough time for you for the important things in your life? And I really want you to tell me. I didn't phrase it, I phrased it better than that, but I tried to make it a pretty neutral question so that they would tell me the things that they thought took me away from them. They said, never. We never felt that. Now, did I completely stress myself out in the process? Yes, too much. I needed more self care. But I showed up for the big things. And I can tell you right now, they didn't always have the gourmet lunch. I didn't always bake the teacher cookies. Sometimes I was like the Venmo mom, like, tell me how much I can pay for this and I'm in. But that's not the stuff that mattered. It mattered that I was there for the big things. And that's what your kids are when they're 3 years old, they don't know whether you're making them a gourmet lunch. I actually talked to somebody who's preschool. The moms are like feeling pressure because this one mom goes to town with little shapes and special little things in the kids' lunchbox. If that's your jam, go for it. But if not, refuse to play those games, because that's one thing men are better about than women, is that they'll just say, I'm not doing that. And they'll let
I don't
it
really care
go.
about that.
Yeah, we could take a lesson on that.
Yeah, we do.
So,
I think we accept a lot of shoulds into our life. I should make a nice lunch. I should be at everything. I should. And then we're just totally exhausted by all the
mhm,
things we should be doing.
yep,
And
that was me.
I try really hard not to should on myself or other people, even in my
Yes,
own
stop
head.
shooting yourself.
Stop shoulding. And so I'm like, oh. So I do what I call lazy parenting. And it's like, my kids need to learn how to do laundry. They need to make themselves lunch. They need to make some, like, my 9-year-old made me breakfast the other day, made eggs. served it to us, and I was like, this is great. This is the benefit of lazy parenting because they gain confidence, you lose stress, and like my whole family, my whole friend group knows I'm not a food person. I don't like cooking. I love entertaining. I love to have all the dishes. I love to set a pretty table. I don't like to go to the grocery store or spend any time in the kitchen. And so
I bake. I don't like to cook, but I'm right there with you.
and one of the things we do with the kids, because of the work that I do, and I really think work should honor who you are and bring your talents out. And I hear a lot of parents say, I have to go to work. I have to go on this work trip. I have to. So what are we teaching our kids? We're teaching them that work is a have to,
Yeah.
not a want to. And so when Antonio and I, my husband, travel for work, we say, I get to go to this trip. I get to go work with these clients. I get to do this.
So
This is really
important.
cool. And here's how I'm weaving my life into it. We're meeting friends in New Orleans last weekend because I had a client, two clients that I was seeing. One had a big event. And I'm like, oh, let's make this some fun.
Yeah.
I'm already gonna be there. Let's make it a we thing. The kids wanted to
Hey,
go. They lost their
I got
privilege,
to
but
travel. I took my kids to Hawaii and to Europe and used my frequent flyer points to give them some great travel. And by the way, I would reframe that lazy parenting. I think that's responsible parenting because those are skills your kids need. And by the time my daughter was, I think, 13, somebody gave me a mom hack that I loved. And my daughter loves to cook. Like she's now the one hosting the events in her apartment and having her friends over in her adult life. She loves it. I didn't. So you know what? She started earning extra allowance cooking meals. I would commute to Bryan College Station. Some nights I'd commute to downtown Houston. It'd be 60 to 90 minutes getting home. There would be dinner on the table, and she enjoyed it. And that to me is an example of her using her talents
yes,
and me finding a way to reward her in a way that mattered to her. She was saving money for a cell phone. Oh, we gave them smartphones back then. I see now we have commercials that we are giving kids non-smartphones again, which is probably a good idea.
absolutely.
But she wanted the cash and she loved to cook and she honed her skills. So now I never have a question of can my kids cook a meal? Can my kids do their laundry? Can my kids clean their bathrooms?
Can
Because
they
they
navigate the
did.
world?
And
Yeah.
and by the way, we had a housekeeper. We had a housekeeper because I worked full time. But when the kids got to be about 8 and 10, I told the housekeeper, do the bare minimum, like scrub the toilet maybe just to make sure it doesn't have rings in it or something like that, but they're going to clean. And they thought I was mean at first because I would say, oh, yes, she's coming to clean the house. She cleans the common areas. She helps me. She's not cleaning your room. You can clean your room. You need to learn
Yeah.
to clean your room. And so that's how we did it. And they appreciated that. I don't know that they appreciated it at the time, but when I started sending them away to camps and things, eighth grade, my son went to a 3-week camp over at one of the colleges in Texas and did his own laundry. And I was like, yay. I threw some of those colored catchers in there so there wouldn't be any colors fading in the laundry. But other than that, he was good. So I think that's part of what makes it work. And it's not all up to us necessarily, especially as our kids get older.
And it just keeps being different things that you're rebalancing. And,
Yep.
you were talking about potty training. That's a whole stage. And then we get into like going to school years. And now our lives have changed again. And then
Yep.
if my kids decided they didn't want to do the after school program anymore. They want a little
Yep.
more freedom. I'm like, great. And
Well,
then they
and
were missing a
just
few
wait.
assignments in class. And I'm like, I think you're going back to the after school program because I don't have time to monitor you. I work till 5.
Oh, the homework. That was always a
Oh,
challenge. But just wait till they're in high school because then they start doing the sports that are before school, after school. And it's so funny. I used to say, I think that's God's way of getting us ready for them to have driver's licenses because you go from, oh my gosh, I cannot stand the thought of my child behind the wheel of a car. That feels so dangerous. I don't know how I'll ever be okay with that. And then you're so sick of the commute back and forth that you're like, oh, thank God they're driving now. And
license.
and then my daughter was what we called her an Uber driver. She babysat one of the neighbor's children and would drive them from school back home. And, sometimes that's the help moms need. But it gets hard to get a dinner on the table with everybody home at the same time when they're in high school. But you're just rebalancing, you're figuring it out, you're figuring out what's going to happen. The more you plan and the more you create some space for those types of changes, the less upset you'll be by them when they happen.
I have are you familiar with the book, The Four Agreements?
Yes. Yes.
So one of my favorite agreements is always do your best. Knowing that some days your best is not going to be that great. And that is one of my mantras, like, I'm doing my best today. And I think it's not that great. It doesn't meet my standards, but it's what I've got today.
That's right.
And it
And
gives
it's
me
based on
this,
your place and your awareness at the time.
my energy level, whatever's going on. I'm like, this is the best I have to give. And I like, it lets me off the hook a little bit because I do put so much pressure on myself to do everything at a
Yeah.
level 10. I'm like, today I'm at a 7, and that's what I
And
have to
that's
give. I'm
okay.
going to finish this. I'm going to send it off. And I know that compared to a lot of people, my 7 is a 10, but it's not my 10. And so,
Yeah.
like, having that little mantra has been so freeing to me to be like, I did it. I did it with what I had to give today.
It's
And
great.
wow,
And it also frees you from the guilt when the hindsight creeps in and you think, well, maybe I should have done this, but no, I did it the best I could at the time.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I read that book once a year. It's such a valuable treasure in my treasury because I every time I read it, I pick out different things that are going on in my life
Yeah.
that I really need to improve or redirect or what it's one of my rebalancing. Like I think one of my rebalancing tricks, hacks is I reread that book, I reread Nonviolent Communication,
Hmm.
and I relook at all my behavioral assessments, Strengths Finder, Predictive Index. I love the Berkman. I put them
Yeah.
all on my calendar every January as a recurring thing, and I
Oh, I love
reread them.
that.
And every year I
That's
find
a great
something
idea.
fresh that's like, oh, I've been carrying shame. Like my whole life, I grew up as a bossy, impatient little girl. Well, guess what my top two strengths are? Activator and command. And no one had ever told me I could use those two things, those liabilities, for anyone's benefit, including mine. And I think that's
Mm.
why I went down the path of working for Gallup and doing all the StrengthsFinder work because I went, I'm 20, I guess I was 25 at the time, was finished with my MBA at Texas A&M, and
Hmm.
I had been shamed mercilessly throughout my entire life for this bossy, impatient little girl syndrome. And when someone told me those were assets, it totally changed my view of myself and what I could accomplish.
I mean, they're truly your superpowers. And maybe I think of them that way because I share that with you. I share the innate leadership and I have to laugh because my daughter is my mini me. My son is very different than I am. But my daughter's my mini me. And when she was 4 years old, I guess, maybe she had just turned 5, she was on the playground and one of the preschool teachers pulled her aside and said, you know, you're not the boss of everyone. You're not the police, and everybody doesn't have to do what you say. And now my daughter says, Mom, that was a real pivotal moment for me because up until that point, I thought I was. But I used to always laugh. And instead of trying to shame that, I would say, you have leadership to spare. You are going to grow into it and you are going to be an amazing leader someday. And it's really been fun to watch her as an adult go into the working world and start to see her own success. And people, of course, are telling her, you work really hard, you do such great work. It's wonderful. But I'm like, don't forget to take care of you. So she's better than her mom. She ran a marathon this year. She devotes herself some time and energy to work out and take care of herself. And I'm thankful for that.
I
Um,
do think that's one of the things that's great about the next generation in our workforce is they do believe that they should have time for themselves, for
yeah.
the things that they want to accomplish, and they can work too. And I think it really frustrates some of the older generation who's like, "Who are you? Who do you think you are to be able to have all those things in your life?" They're like,
Yeah.
"Well, I just make time for them, and also I'm better about working smarter than harder." And our generation, we're just workhorses to the
Yep.
point of to our own detriment. And they're like, this is dumb. We shouldn't do dumb stuff. We should do this smarter. We should create a system. We should create a process. We should create an
Yeah.
AI tool. And it pisses off older people sometimes
It
because like
does.
it feels
Well,
lazy,
because
but I'm like, this is brilliant.
it's funny because we wonder why these things live on in corporations, but everybody is trained by the people who've been there a long time, people who are more senior, and so things tend to perpetuate. And it's funny though because we look at this younger generation when people try to say the young generation is entitled and not working hard, whatever you want to say about them. I disagree. I think you find really hard workers and lazy people in every generation. But by the way, we're the ones who raised them. Now, we were raised by people, I'm a Gen X, and I was raised by people who are technically, I think, known as the silent generation. They're before the baby boomers. And that's a really interesting generation because that was the generation where you were expected to grin and bear it and not say anything. You were expected to come to work, and if you had a bad boss, you would just grin and bear it until you got a new boss or they moved on, but you would never think about quitting. And so I think that there are some great things that have come from people not being willing to just be silent and just put up with things. I do think that there's probably some good and bad in all of that. I'm one of those people that always kind of sees the gray area. I figure when things are complex, things are rarely black or white, and they're complex because they're hard to solve. But I do think that job jumping, getting frustrated with the bad boss and leaving has led to a little bit of a challenge with people not knowing how to navigate through those tough situations.
100%.
Yeah, like
100%. There's such a lack of courage. People
yes,
will jump jobs rather than ever have a single conversation about, hey, I'd like to make more money. I'd like to earn the
yeah.
next level. How do I do that?
Or I
If
feel
this
like you're
doesn't offer
putting
to
too much
them,
on me, or it's not fair the way our work's being assigned. Someone's getting more, someone's getting less, or perhaps, this isn't going the way I'd want it to go. My kids have had multiple opportunities in their short careers already to have conversations with their bosses when things aren't going the way they want them to. And I keep telling them, I'm like, you are here for a reason, and there is something you're going to learn. You don't know right now, but someday you're going to look back and say, I learned a ton from that job. And in particular, my son had a job that was really, really tough during COVID. The company shall remain nameless, but it's a very, very large technology company that's in a lot of our households every day, and really challenging environment. And he stayed over 3 years, and I was so proud of him because he learned so much, and now it's serving him so well. He's back, he's in law school now. But if he would have just quit or just said, I'm going to get another job, he wouldn't have had those learning experiences. So sometimes when things aren't going the way that we want them to, having the staying power to say, and it's again the agility, it's rebalancing. What can I learn from this situation? What can I affect? What can I influence? What do I need to take off the table? Those skills can really help us have better discernment and better relationships. Because many times when we think things are so bad, the minute we start talking about them and really figuring out the root causes of these things, we find out things are not as they seem. And things are rarely as bad as we think they are in one moment of frustration. So, there's good and bad of every generation. There's good and bad of the way we were raised and what it says about us. But I appreciate that my children are willing to have the tough conversations and to question things and not just take things as they are, even though it drives me crazy sometimes.
yes. Okay, so I want to back up a little bit. We started down this path a little and then we went back to the personal because it is
Yeah,
such a part
because
of
there's so much.
our whole lives, right? But I want to go back to the business thing because as I'm looking at some of the notes I've been taking, so I'm thinking about like defining one of our tips I think that really needs to come out of this discussion is how do we define our own talents, our values, and our priorities?
Yeah,
That really transcends both personal and professional.
it does.
It's at the personal individual level, but also the business level and
Yeah.
defining what are we good at as a company? What do we value? And what the heck are our priorities so that we can all align on this rowboat and be rowing in the same direction
Yeah.
rather than just being busy, being busy.
Yes. Oh my, there's some great tools to help. I mean, obviously, StrengthsFinder is one we've already talked about. That can be done personally, it can be done in a corporate environment. I have worked with clients on this for years. I can remember being with Chase Bank, gosh, early 2000s, doing some training all over Texas for them, and they would have a card sort. And it was very cool because Chase had a class called Marketing Yourself, and it was about internal mobility, getting jobs in the company, how to put your best foot forward. And they had an exercise that was so simple. It was just a card sort. And it was a quadrant model where it was like, the things you are good at and you love to do, those are strengths. The things you're good at and you don't necessarily love to do, those are skills. The things you don't like to do and you're not very good at, you have to hope they're less relevant, or you need to possibly shore them up or find other people on your team who have those as talents. And then if you're not good, but you'd love to be good, those are interests. If it's something new you'd like to learn, interests. So find ways to do more of that in your job. That's super simple. There are, I know of, gosh, 5 or 6 right off the bat assessment tools and learning experiences that can help teams do this, that can help companies do this, just so they can better define what each person is uniquely talented at and brings to the table. And if we could have people doing more of that and less of the minutia, we'd all be a lot happier in our jobs and more productive. So,
I've done the same thing with people with the values cards. And
yeah,
like I love the exercise. I can't remember the company. What if I have them handy? Um, where
actually, I
you
have
take
some
and
right here.
you sort yes and no, and then you take your yeses and you sort kind of and absolutely. And you get down, yeah.
Personal values cards. Yep.
And you get down to like, I think you have to sort it to 5 or 6. And you're like, these are the most important values in my life. And if like I actually was sitting next to a father and son one day on a plane and I had them in my briefcase and I was like, you should do these. This is fun. And they
Ah,
were like
how
on their
cool.
little tray table and they
Oh,
were
I
talking
love
about them. And
it.
it was so, we did it with our school board. I'm on a school board in Calusa. And we did it
Yeah,
with our board members. And we were talking about where we have
love
overlapping
that.
priorities and where values and where we differ. And it was just a really interesting conversation, but always coming back to those are touchstones. And I heard somebody say one time, as you're thinking about defining your values, the things that upset you tend to be clues to when your values have been violated. So mine is always around respect. When people are not treated with kindness and respect at every level of our economy,
Hmm.
that always is upsetting to me, whether it's about me or not.
Yeah.
Respect is my number one value. And
And
that's
knowing that
respect
is
for,
huge.
it's huge. Like it's respect for time, energy, enthusiasm, talent. It's comes down to respect. And so those are, I think, some good clues that it's like, oh, why am I upset about this? Oh, somebody's might be fairness, right? Might be so many different
Well, I
aspects.
mean, I will say credit to Exxon, my first employer. We went through a class called Increasing Human Effectiveness. It really changed the course of my life because I got trained to facilitate that. It was the first class I ever became a facilitator for, and ended up going out on my own, becoming a learning and development professional, all kinds of things. Because in my 20s, going through that class, they had me and all of us go through an exercise where we clarified our 5 uppermost values and our lifetime goals. And you don't have to know how you're going to get there. They're lifetime goals. So you're not making them smart and putting them into an action plan right now, but you at least have them written down. And so I have an exercise. I decided when I started speaking that I needed to give people tools like that. So I have created my own version of that because I do think if you want to know what your legacy is, if you want to know what you should be saying yes to and saying no to, you got to know yourself. So, what you're talking about with the values cards, with the different assessments and exercises, it's all about knowing what you stand for. And if you haven't taken time to consider that, or you haven't taken time to consider it lately, it's a really valuable thing to go back and say, does this still work for me? Like my top 5 are faith, family, serenity, health, and contribution. The funny thing is, I can also tell you which one of those always lost in my frenetic pace. And I bet you could also guess it's health. So, and serenity was about being okay with the things I couldn't change. No, I'm not an alcoholic. I didn't know it was part of the Alcoholics Anonymous program, but it's a great prayer about changing what you can, and then it's picking your battles. But contribution was a big one, and that's my job. Like I always want to feel like I'm making a difference, but it really comes to faith and family first. And so knowing that when I leave this earth, those are the things I want people to know that I stood for. that changes how I show up every day. And that's important. And it's funny because even on Strength Finder, my number one, you'd kind of laugh at this. I've taken it a few times, but I pulled it out one time. I was leading diversity, equity, and inclusion at my company along with a couple other HR functions. And I was like, why did my boss put me in charge of this? Because I don't feel like an expert. And usually when you get promoted to be head of talent or head of compensation or whatever, you get promoted because you know the subject matter really well. And she told me why she put me in that role. And she said, some people, it's their life's work and they're experts, but they push really hard and they don't necessarily meet the company where they are. Or maybe they want to go too fast, too bold, and it ends up falling flat because it wasn't fit for purpose. And then she said, and you certainly don't want to be on the other side where you have no time in your life for DE&I at all. And it's funny to me that that's now a lightning rod. Speaking of respect and hot buttons, to me, and no, it's not about just giving something to someone because of some arbitrary factor. That's not really what it's about in my world. What it's about is individualization. And I looked back and she said, you can be objective. You can help people understand why this matters, how to incorporate it into our company, why it's important. And I still maintain it's completely important because it has to do with being respectful, creating an environment that's respectful and productive, understanding diversity of thought, different perspectives. And it's such a lightning rod topic that I rarely talk about it. But one day I pulled out my Strengths Finder and I saw that individualization was my number one. And I was like, that explains everything because I am radically inclusive. I am radically in favor of belonging. I don't care what is on the visible diversity spectrum, like what you look like on the outside, male, female, what your culture, your ethnicity is. That's part of it, but a lot of it's on the inside. There's a lot of diverse factors
There's
within
more
me
on the
that you
inside
don't
than the
see.
outside.
There's way more on the inside. I'm visually impaired. People don't always know that by looking at me. They might if they see me squint, but I'm a cancer survivor. There's a lot of stuff that is affects how people show up, but it's all about meeting people where they are one-on-one and having respectful dialogue to understand their unique perspective on this world. And if we could all just focus on that, wouldn't it be a kinder place? And I was like, that's why I'm doing this, because I am all about helping us each learn to understand and respect and be curious about knowing one another instead of just wanting to hang out with people just like us and do things just the way we always have. And so
Individualization is such a cool talent in the Strengths Finder language because it's this, I see who you are. I see past all these labels and all these outward things, and I get you in a way that tends to make a great manager. It makes great gift givers. It is such a connecting tissue
yeah.
to see what each person brings to the table. And it's in the Strengths Finder language, it's one of the two super strengths because it is the essence
Oh,
of
I didn't
Strengths
know that.
Finder. It is because it brings out the I love this concept in that space that name it, claim it, and aim it. Name it. What are my
Yeah, yeah.
values, my purpose, my strengths? Claim it and really own and say, maybe faith is not important to me, but it's inherently critically important to you. So as
Yeah.
you name it and claim it and take ownership of that, now what am I going to aim that at? Well, it's my contribution, right? How am I going to make a contribution? I'm going to do it through family and faith and my work. And those things it makes it easier to say no to all this other stuff. Like I joke that I really don't want my kids to be very good at sports because when
I
I was living in
understand that.
Texas, like it's such it's a terrible American parent thing to say, but I had a cousin who was a rodeo cowboy and he barely finished his GED because he was on this path. Well, there's no money in that path and there's a lot of physical outcome that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And my kids are started their lifetime in Texas and then we moved back to California to the farm. And I watched these parents around us give every extra minute and dollar to kids sports. And I'm going, I think we're missing the mark here. And so I just like took it all off the table. I'm like, I don't really care if I want them to do sports and be healthy. I don't want them to be good enough for anyone to want them on the extra team, the travel ball, the all-star league. I'm like, I just want you to
Yeah.
play the sport and then move on with your life.
Well, my daughter played travel volleyball. You know, my stepdaughter's a professional volleyball player
Yes.
in Italy. So but she is different. She is one of the toughest, most gifted athletes I've ever seen. And it's hilarious because it's not the fact that, and I didn't know her then, but I know her father very well, given that he's my husband and the love of my life. It's not that they just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. This was innate ability. She's just really good and she's getting to see the world and it's wonderful and it worked for her. But every time parents would talk to me about, their kids trying to be the next college D1 athlete on a scholarship, it's like, just remember one injury can change all of that. And when you look at the stats of how rare it is for somebody to have that kind of talent and have a career, the odds aren't in your favor. I'm not saying you can't enjoy it, but it is hilarious to me when these people are like, you see little Johnny over there? How's he doing? You think he could be a pro someday? It's like, he's 7. He's 7. Let him have a
Let it
life.
play.
and
Yes.
and we get so wrapped up in that kind of stuff. If your kid is smart, if they're intellectually gifted, you're not supposed to talk about it. It's rude to talk about how smart your kid is. But if they're gifted on the football field,
By
everyone
all
knows.
means, brag
Yeah.
away.
And it's a complex thing, and it's funny. I did not know that about individualization. I've taken strengths a few times. That one's always up there, but I was surprised when it came up number one for me. But it explains a lot because, like, for instance, like my faith is really important to me, but I'm not going to shove it down your throat. I recognize there are a lot of different faiths. I do think it's really good when you have a higher power of some sort that you believe is part of the story and it's not just me and my ego and my giftedness. I think that's a really good grounding feature, but I'm not going to sit here and, proselytize from like it's a pulpit or something like that. And I'm going to respect that not everybody has the same faith as I do. And by the way, I happen to be Christian, but it's like they'll know we're Christian by our love. That was one of the songs we sang at church when I was a little kid. And it's like loving each other. There's that individualization. Loving each, seeking to understand, seeking to make connections with people. That to me is what it's all about. And that's why I love the work that I do because it's just so cool to meet people. And I got so mad the other day because I have this YouTube talk and it's now, I think, reached 1.1 million people, which has blown me away. It's
Amazing.
the, I spoke at Oxford University and then people were saying, thank you for unpacking this. It's got 3 really common sense tips of how you can rebalance. And then somebody said something like, oh, rich white person problems. And I was like, now hold on a second. And of course I wasn't going to engage with an online troll, wanting, but I was like, I have so many friends and community members and people in my close orbit that are not white and are not rich. And by the way, just because I happen to be Caucasian doesn't mean you know everything about me. It was like, are you trying to say that everybody of different, ethnicities or whatever, that they're not working? I mean, I hate to even go down this path, but I was like, come on. I know so many really hardworking people of all
Yeah,
different backgrounds. And I thought, man, why do people say stuff like that? But it's just crazy the assumptions people make just based on the way we look or the fact that I'm talking about being a worn out, burned out professional. Well, yeah, I am a professional. I worked my butt off and I'm not sorry. But that doesn't mean that this is not a problem everybody can have. Some of the hardest working people I know didn't go to college, don't have, 3 houses or whatever. I mean, I would not consider myself, well, I used to always tell my kids, you're not rich for money, you're not rich for possessions, you're rich based on the type of life you lead and the relationships in it. That's what's going to make you rich.
that's where it comes from. Yeah.
So yeah, so sorry I got off on that soapbox, but I just couldn't believe. I was like, why would somebody take the time to write something ugly like that, but they do. And
So actually, I want to go back to that YouTube video, that talk. What are the three tips? Are there any we haven't covered yet that you want to make sure we squeeze in before this discussion ends? And maybe in the show notes, we can leave a link to that video.
yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do all of that. And you'll laugh because they're very simple tips, like deceptively simple. So the first one is think. And we have covered that. Like think what matters most.
Yeah.
Discern what you stand for. Discern what you value. Second one is give up. And that's the permission slip. That's say no. Give up what's not serving you. Give up the friends that are one way friendship. I mean, I'm not saying give them up, but like
Let them go with them.
let go of feeling the responsibility to continue pouring into something that's not pouring back into you. Okay, so think, give up, and then let go. And let go is different than giving up. And it's things like letting go of perfectionism, letting go of trying to do and have and be it all, because being fulfilled in life isn't about all you have and all you do. It's about discerning what matters most and doing that exceptionally well. And so think, give up, let go. Those are my three really simple tips, but it's about really getting clear on what matters most, what you stand for, and what you want to do exceptionally well. So that's the tips in a nutshell.
That's beautiful. I think the best book I've read, and I actually read it twice this year, was called Letting Go. It is a
Yeah,
phenomenal,
I'll have to look
phenomenal
at that one.
book. The audio is great. It's a little academic, but it's like therapy meets manifestation,
Oh,
and
lovely.
really just we have so little power, and we try to control so many things that if we really just fully let go of them, it's amazing how much weight is lifted from our shoulders. And
Yeah.
it was really wonderful. Really
You know, it's
wonderful.
funny because I also have three other words that I use a lot. They aren't part of this talk, but in my longer rebalancing talk, I'll talk about surrender, trust, and faith. And surrender is exactly what you just said. Let go of your plan. Like the more I let go of trying to control everything, the better my life has become because I'm able to open myself up to other possibilities and surrender to the fact that life doesn't always go the way you think it's going to go. But what can you do in that moment to take the next step? And then trust is, it's trusting in the fact that the future will be better if you can stay the course, trusting in your abilities, trusting in the relationships that sustain you. And then the faith part is just that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, is having faith that there's a larger picture here, that you don't always have all the answers, but that when you can boldly take steps in the right direction, the path will illuminate in front of you, even if you don't know what it is right at the moment. And so I think all of that has been very helpful for me to open myself up to true rebalancing and true fulfillment. So it's a process, and it's not something that comes that naturally to people who are used to trying to control things. And, you know, I think the day you become a mother, you kind of realize you don't necessarily have control over everything, because now all of a sudden there are these little kids that can change everything at a moment's notice. And it's a beautiful thing if you can embrace it instead of feeling like, oh no, now what do I do?
For sure. Well, we are quickly running out of time. I want to make sure anything else. So I have a note on books. So of
Yes.
course, I think we need to recommend that people read the Rebalancing Act.
Thank you.
And
I'd love
I
that.
have in here the four agreements because it's my favorite.
Mhm.
And I'm
Mhm.
going to add letting go because I think it's like a yellow and white cover, like maybe sliced down the middle, yellow and white. That was
Nice.
fantastic. Any other resources you'd recommend people look into if they're interested in this concept? And
Um, well, I would say if they want to be part of my community, I'd love to have them, and they can join the community at carolenneking.com. And if they want a free resource to help them get clear on values and just kind of get a start at that work, it takes maybe an hour of focused time. It's really good to do right before the beginning of the new year.
Yes.
I do have a downloadable, it's called a Legacy Blueprint workbook that people can grab and just helps them ask some of those questions and think about them. So that's a resource I would give them from my own repertoire. But yeah, I just think the more you start thinking about what you stand for, the more resources you'll see out there. Lots of really good talks online. Like I said, mine's on YouTube. It's an Oxford talk. You can find links to that. Um, and I am really enjoying the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Big
I
book
read
right
that one
now.
before I read Letting Go. I've been on a path
Yeah.
this year.
And it's really powerful. Like I've really enjoyed her podcast about the generation that's in their 20s. Those are my kids. And the fact that how they're experiencing life today is so different than how we did in our 20s, how I did. And you're
Yeah.
younger than me, but her let them theory is just phenomenal because that speaking of things you can't control, you can't control other people, and what they're going to think is what they're going to think. You can do the best you can and try to be intentional, but there are times when you just have to let them. And I really, really like that book.
It's a great theory with our kids. They have totally different approaches than we do to get things done, and it doesn't make them wrong. So
That's right.
that's been fun. Okay, so Carol, thank you. Thank you for spending time with me today. I look forward to continuing this conversation, both hopefully on the podcast and of course off. Thank you for
Yes,
taking
me
the
too.
time to write a really powerful book and really clarify your thinking around this topic, because I think it is a contribution, which is one of your values, and I feel that contribution. I think it's wonderful. So if
Thank
people
you.
would like to reach out to you, if they'd like to have you speak at an event or want to be part of your community, how would you like them to reach out?
Easiest is carolenneking.com. You can get links to my email, my socials, all that kind of stuff. It's my name, carolenneking.com. And Melissa, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast, of course. But I also want to call out the fact that when I was writing my book and I was interviewing people, I interviewed you, and then you did something really special. You sent an email to 6 or 7 of your friends who you thought I should interview, who you thought would be great people for me to talk to. And they were. And I did talk to them. And there's a lot I could say here because they ended up introducing me to people. And this whole thing has just sort of mushroomed. But that is a great example of being intentional and using your talents as a connector to help people like me. And I appreciate it. And it made my book better. So thank you very much for doing that.
One of my metrics in life is the connections that I make for other people, whether it's somebody needs swim lessons for their kids, or Carol needs people to talk to for her book that would really be good
Yeah.
contributors. And that's one of the most fun things that I do in life. And I keep track of it. And I keep track of ones that come my way, because I am always working on rebalancing and making sure my contributions match what's coming my way. And it's my entire business is through referral because of those connections, because I really care
Well,
and
you do a very good job with it. And I think that's a great message for others is, you never know the power of just one email, one phone call, one thought, just the small things that you can do to reach out become the big things. And that was a really big thing to me. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I hope anybody listening will join us for another episode of You've Got People Problems, because they're endless and they're very complicated. These problems that we have in our own heads, in our businesses. And I loved this conversation today, Carol. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of You've Got People Problems. If you got something out of the conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with the other leaders in your network, because let's face it, we all have people problems. You can watch full episodes on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcast app. But either way, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.